What's going on, everybody? I'm back. Hi, my name's RJ. I'm here to talk to you about the second night of Atlantic City. Apologize for the delay. We were attempting to arrive to this house, which is close to AC, because I'm going back to the show tonight. Didn't go last night, but we have someone in the waiting room who was there last night, and it's going to be fun to talk about. There's a lot to talk about now, and our guest Jackson, he's been on the Helping Friendly podcast before, and he's a musician, and we haven't talked to him yet this tour, so I think he'll have a lot of thoughts. So we're going to add him in a second. This whole thing, as I've mentioned before, is presented by Shift Genuine Cannabis. Go to shiftcannabis.com to enter the contest to win a bunch of stuff. 2 nights, 2 tickets to the 30th and 31st, airfare, hotel. It's all courtesy of Shift. They're awesome. So this is all happening right now. Go to shiftcannabis.com and please post comments in the chat. We'd love to answer them and address them. And I'm going to add Jackson now. Hey, man.
Hey, RJ, how are you?
I'm good. I was thinking this morning, I think the first time you were on the Helping Friendly podcast, it was like, we talked about a 2011 show, I think, the Blossom show.
Yeah.
And I feel like,
that's right.
14 maybe?
Yeah, 13, something like that. I don't know. Sometime around then.
Sometime around then. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. A little tired
Good.
after 2 nights in the sand, but amped after seeing 2 shows and excited for a third one.
Yeah, where are you now? Are you in Atlantic City or nearby?
I am in Atlantic City in an Airbnb with a bunch of friends, pretty much right off the boardwalk. So
Awesome.
Great, convenient location.
That is awesome. Cool. So I know you're a musician, and we've talked a lot over the past several years about Fish. Before we get into the show itself, like, what are you hearing this tour? Like, how would you describe this tour so far? Just from I guess more from a musical perspective, but also just anything you're observing before we get into the show.
Yeah. I think this tour has been really strong so far. I think, people have talked about this a lot, including on these podcasts, but the new sounds and effects that Paige is using in terms of the synthesizers and Trey's new sounds have definitely defined, I think, the sound of this tour so far, which I always welcome. I like when they continue to experiment, and I happen to really like these new sounds and the new jamming styles.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's cool. I think they're playing the right mix of repeated songs, like the big songs that we all want to hear once each run, sort of thing, but also continuing to add new songs to the mix as they go through the tour. So yeah, I've really liked it. I saw the Hershey shows, and then these first 2 in Atlantic City, and then I'll be there back tonight.
That's awesome, man. And what about Hershey? How did you feel about Hershey?
I really loved Hershey. I think the first night was my first show back, so I was just so excited to be seeing Fish again, and I really liked the show. But night 2, Hershey was of these 4 shows I've seen so far, that one's been my favorite. I really liked that show. Yeah, we were feeling really good about it. Awesome Birds of a Feather and Ruby Waves, and it was a cool venue. Really old school for sure.
Yeah.
Very different from AC.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been 4 fun shows so far.
So the Hershey thing, do you feel like there's ups and downs so far, or do you feel like it's been mostly how do you see that if you look at the Fishnet rankings, of course, out of 5, there's several of the shows are in the 3.2, 3.3 range, which is kind of shocking to me. But I realize that some shows are like the Deer Creek night one and one of the Alpharetta shows. There are shows that are monster jams, which I think is really what the ranked ratings usually are about. But do you see them as ups and downs, or do you see it as one kind of big continuum?
Yeah, I do think there are ups and downs, as there are in any tour. But I agree with you that the rankings tend to be closely tied to whether or not there's a handful of big jams in the show. But also if you go into different online Fish communities, you get completely different vibes, right? If you talk to people on Twitter versus the Fish subreddit versus Fish.net. They all kind of have um, their own angles.
Yeah.
I usually just go by like what my group of friends thought at the show and what I felt, and we all loved the Hershey shows and last night in AC.
Cool. That's awesome. So I went on Friday night. I didn't go last night. I was expecting that Saturday might be the most crowded night. Did it seem more crowded, or just? I mean, there's a lot of people out there.
So I think my friends and I, we were all a little kind of taken by surprise at like the scale of this event on the first night. I don't think we were really prepared for it. I've heard that there were more people there on Saturday night, but I think there were just so many people both nights that like it was hard to tell if there was actually more. I mean, the overhead aerial shots that people have been sharing around are pretty crazy. It's yeah. I mean, it's a huge event. You can feel the scale of it when you're there. Um, but I will say, both nights, despite it being a really full concert field, there's been plenty of space for everyone to dance. It's, we're not packed like sardines in there. There's ample space to move.
Yeah, which is awesome. I really appreciate that. And it seems like everywhere you go, it's sort of like it seems so crowded from afar, and then you get into space, and it's like, okay, it's actually, it eases the anxiety a little bit with the whole,
For sure.
pandemic thing. Um,
Right. Oh, that thing.
so
Yeah.
yeah, what did you think about last night? Well, I guess Friday night and last night. Do you feel differently about them? Do you see them as kind of similar? And then I want to ask you more about last night. But do you feel like yesterday was yeah, similar, different?
Um, well, I'll say I liked yesterday's show more than the Friday night show. I liked them both for sure. I almost felt like the Friday night show is almost more in line with what we'd expect for the Saturday type show. There was the big tweezer and the gin, which were awesome. But then it was kind of like the rock and roll show after that,
Yeah,
which I'm totally fine with.
yeah,
Last
yeah.
night, you're talking about this before. The ups and downs of the tour, and how closely like people's perception of the show is closely tied to the amount of big jams. And the AC run so far has not had like the scale of like big jams that some of the other tour stops have had. But I think they were still doing some like really like risk-taking stuff last night during the show,
Hmm.
whether it's like the really dissonant chalk dust, the melts. Um, so like I still think they're fitting a lot in, even though they're not, haven't played these 25-minute jams like they've done in Alpharetta or Deer Creek.
Nice. Okay, that's cool. That's a good perspective, because I had so much fun on Friday night, but I think like the giant tweezer just kind of like that's the show. You know what I mean? In a
Yeah.
way, like it kind of makes the show. Um,
Hey, it's worth the
well,
price of admission alone.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's get into the show. The I guess dispute du jour on Fish Twitter, which is a very tiny corner of the universe that we live in, is the slow llama. What's your what's your take?
I dig it. I mean, I prefer Fast Llama, but the best of both worlds is that I get two, one of each in the last
Yeah.
four shows. So I'll take both every time.
Yeah, it seems like they've been. It's interesting. There's like llama, bathtub gin. There's like these songs that they just like keep playing over and over, and they seem to fit. Like I think the slow llama fits so well with this sound, right? With
For sure.
the right, like the Page and Trey kind of, unscientifically, my description is like they're just like fucking around with all their new toys, and it seems to
Yeah.
work. I really like the funky style, but what the Hershey one was pretty solid as well.
Yeah, that was like the most ripping Fast Llama I've heard in quite a while. And it was funny because I think right after they played that, Trey was joking about like, "Hey, why don't we do that more often? That was really fun."
Yeah,
And then a few nights
yeah,
later, they come and do the slow version.
yeah. I mean, it's also like with so many songs in rotation, and I think at this point I don't know the numbers, but I know as of a few days ago, it was 150, 160 unique songs played. It's more
Is
now,
is
but
that like low for a tour? I think it is, right? In like
I
recent
think it
years.
might. Yeah, for 10 shows in or so, it seems like it's probably a little low. Like, but I think it's just interesting that like llama, you wouldn't expect to get a llama twice in 3 nights, right? Or 4 nights. Um,
Maybe they just think of
doesn't
it as a completely different song.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the
Yeah.
Goose, the Goose. I don't know if you're a Goose fan, but the So Ready versus Slow Ready are like they're two separate songs. So maybe
I,
they
I'm
need
not
to.
I'm not really keyed in on them yet. I know a few songs and I've dug what I've heard, but it's been on my to-do list for a while.
Yeah, well, maybe we need to petition Fish.net to call it slow llama versus regular llama. Anyway,
Yeah,
you get the llama, the tube, and the Destiny, three sort of funky
yeah.
songs to start. How was the vibe in there, and what were some of your thoughts on the first set overall?
I really like the song calls in the first set. 46 Days. Uh, One of those songs that like just rocks every time. And I think last night was like a standard version, which means like a great version, you know.
Yeah.
But it really got the crowd like amped up more than usual, I think, last night. I think that's like what really sucked people in. People were going wild for that. But I was calling the Yamar before the show. It felt like the perfect beach song, so I was really happy to get that. Soul Shakedown Party, that's always a welcome surprise. Um, and it kind of had like a fun like beach party sort of vibe to it until Melt came in and things obviously got weird there, which I'm always here for.
So okay, so there's a set your soul free sort of start, and I didn't watch the
Yeah,
webcast, but I would. Do you think that Trey changed his mind, or was he just sort of like messing around before starting Split Open and Melt? It sounded like they were starting the song to me.
it's always funny, like we try to like put ourselves into their mind, like what were they thinking, and like we'll never actually know, but it's like whatever my speculation is will sound dumb, but yeah, I mean, I definitely heard it and we all thought they were about to play Set Your Soul Free, but which would have been fine, but I'll take Melt any day.
Yeah, really cool, and I do think "Set Yourself Free" is gonna make an appearance tonight. I feel like it kind of
Yeah,
has to. But
yeah,
so the Split Open and Melt. I just put a comment on the screen from
yeah.
Lance, who was watching on Facebook, similar to Nashville, and I was at those Nashville shows, and Drew Fish, I was talking to him after the show, and he's like, "That's my favorite part of a show when people stop dancing because they can't because it's like so dissonant and
Yeah,
it doesn't really work." And did it feel like that where people kind of spaced out and like what the hell's going on? Like what was going
for
on during that month?
yeah, like when I feel like always in the way they've been playing Melt these last few years, it's like they come into the jam and then people like slowly just like stop dancing and like eventually they're just kind of sitting there. And that was definitely me.
Did
Yeah.
you have what was the view of the light rig like, and what was it like seeing that for the new one for the first time in person?
It was really cool. It's awesome that CK5 is continuing to do new things. It really I think says a lot about the band. We all know this, but like they've had the same lighting designer since the 80s. When they moved into arenas, they very easily could have like got a new lighting director who had experience in those types of venues, but they grew their own guy, and now he's like the best in the game by far. And
Yeah,
they just
crazy.
grew together, and just it's so awesome, and it continues to get better.
Well, so did you notice anything different in person versus like watching the webcast in terms of the lights? Like, did anything stick out to you?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I think the one thing that stood out to me is just like how more prominent the lights are in the first set because they're the
Mm,
bright LEDs versus
good point.
sometimes the
Yeah.
summer shows the first set you don't get too much of the lights. This was the first time in I can't even remember the last time I had the big kind of video screens up on the side of the stage. Like even at like Magna Ball and Super Bowl, I don't think they had those or anything like that. So
Yeah.
they're a
Yeah.
little distracting personally, but when it's like such a big concert field and it's hard to see the stage, um, it's okay.
Yeah. That's a good point. And I think I didn't really think about the lighting in terms of the time of day, but you're right. It's like it's more intense from the beginning, which is cool because you don't sometimes you just don't see the lights until it gets dark.
Yeah.
Um, where were you on the beach?
I was kind of like, I don't know, 20 feet or so right of the soundboard mic
Hmm.
side. So kind of in the sweet spot from a sound perspective.
Yeah. Kind of
Um,
perfect.
yeah, it was perfect. I mean, a straight sight line. The sound was perfect. I was kind of on the opposite side for night one, and the sound was great there. Mike has been cutting through the mix a lot better in AC from my vantage points than he did in Hershey. But I think it's also might have something to do with just like the kind of epic like festival rig that they have going on right now.
Yeah. Does it feel like a festival to you? I asked Tom this yesterday because I'm like, yeah, a lot of people have said like, well, it's kind of their festival, and I'm like, I get that perspective, but there's a lot of differing opinions on it.
I'll say this. I hope Fish doesn't think that this is what their festivals should be like now.
Fair.
It does have a bit of a different vibe from like a regular show because I
Yeah,
think most people are going to this entire run or multiple parts of the run, and I think it's more of a destination versus people who are just like coming from home every
yeah,
night. So it's I would say it's a little bit in between. It has kind of like the Randall's Island sort of vibe to it.
yeah,
Um, but I think anyone who's been to a like a real fish festival will tell you that this is not a fish festival.
yeah. I think that's fair. Yeah, we don't want that.
Yeah,
We don't want the band getting the idea that they don't have to do festivals anymore.
exactly. If you're
um,
listening,
if you're listening, they're. I think all four of them are watching on Facebook
yeah,
on one computer.
yeah.
Um, so tell us about the second set. What's your what are your thoughts about the set?
I loved it. I did some like internet sleuthing last night and today, just to like see what people's opinions were. And they seem to be, some people loved it. I think most of the people at the show, especially all the people I've talked to, definitely loved it. But it's not necessarily what I think we've come to expect from this tour. Again, like it
Yeah,
didn't have the 20-minute jam, the 25-minute jam, but it was interesting all the way throughout. I was actually really hoping to hear "I Never Needed You" like this before.
yeah,
So that was a good rocking song to kick off the set, and then "Drowned," like with being on the beach, it makes sense to hear that, but it was still like kind of off my radar. So when Paige started it up, I was kind of caught off guard in a great way, and I thought there was some really cool jamming in there. And I think when they're kind of jamming a little bit, I think I forget. Someone coined the phrase the micro jams, right? Who was
yeah.
that? Jonathan, yeah.
Jonathan. Yes.
And when they're doing like these cool like micro jams and like all these different moments of the show, you don't feel like, or at least I don't necessarily feel like I'm missing out on the big jams because there's these cool moments spread throughout. And then what came after Drown, because there was some Ghost, and like Ghost.
Ghost.
When I looked at the song times after the show, like I couldn't believe that Ghost was like 11 or 12 minutes or something because it had all these moving parts, and it was actually one of my like I thought it was one of the most interesting ghosts I've heard in a
Hmm.
while because it just
Yeah.
had like these like, sort of like small mini movements to them that each had their own kind of vibe, but it kind of kept morphing and evolving and didn't have that sort of like typical linear ghost build that we all know and love.
Yeah. So, sorry, there are a lot of dogs at this house. I think people can probably hear them in the background. That it's interesting because I look so like last night's show has out of on Fishnet and it's early, but 3.79 out of 5, and Friday night 3.74 out of 5. And I just think like I think these shows are much better than that, but I do think it's the lack of like a 30-minute jam that's like,
Yeah,
people don't. I think a lot of fans actually, and this might be because of like the way that we consume music and other content now, like just jump to the long jam, and if there's not something that's like 20 minutes plus, it's like a 15-minute drown, like well, I'm not going to bother with that, I'll just
yeah.
wait until the next 20-minute something. I don't know, I feel like maybe these shows are slightly underrated, I don't know.
I think so too. I mean, I think people look back on the 1.0 shows obviously very fondly. It was like the band in their prime. But I think back then, because you didn't hear every show in real time, it took some time to get the tapes. I think people appreciated the like average regular shows more. Yes, they were of a very high quality, but now when you go back and you listen to those shows, you tend to go back to like the really epic shows of 1.0, and you don't necessarily go back and listen to the average great shows. So I think we're often like comparing. Sometimes I just feel like people forget that like that there's always going to be an average, right? You can't, not every show is going to top the next show. And if you're going to be bummed out that you get like an average good show, then like, I don't know, I try to have a little bit more fun.
That's a good suggestion.
Yeah.
um, but you're right though, these the micro jam kind of phenomenon, we were talking about it on HFPod like in 2019, I think, maybe 2018. I feel like there was like a couple of years ago when it started, 10 or 12 minutes, and like a lot of ground could be explored. And I feel like at the beginning of this tour, it was like, there was a 20 to 25-minute jam every night. And now, like, it seems to be, maybe that's actually the advantage of it, is that they're actually getting more used to it and they can get to these places faster, which, people see the song times and are like, oh, that must not be that good. But I feel like like what you're saying, I agree with, which is like they can get there pretty quickly. Like the Chalk Dust, as you mentioned at the beginning, was pretty weird for eight
Yeah,
minutes.
for sure.
You
Yeah,
know?
I think yeah, it was. I think like if you look back to some of the big jams earlier in the tour, like the Tweezer and Alpharetta and things like that, they were great. But I think they were kind of pushing it forward just to kind of like figure out like what the jamming style is going to be with these new sounds and things like that, and a little bit of searching. And I think now they've kind of like ironed out what that sound is, and like you said, I think they can access it a little bit quicker. They don't need to, jam for 20 minutes to get to that sound. Although I hope they do tonight. I think we'll get a big something tonight. Despite saying all these things, the big jams are like my favorite things
Yeah,
about like doing
yeah.
the shows, and it is what I hope for. So I think we'll get one at least tonight. Um, but yeah, I mean, I haven't felt like the shows were lacking because of that. And
Yeah.
the Tweezer on night one was big, and yeah,
It was really, really fun. And I agree with you. I mean, to me, the best feeling at a Fish show is when you forget what song it is. That's
for
kind of
sure.
like that's the best part when you're like, wait a second, this is, are we still, is this still something? Is this still Set
Yeah,
Your Soul Free or whatever? Or,
yeah.
that's why we go. So I guess you can't blame fans for wanting those moments. But if you're looking at the improv and the quality of the improv, it's there even in a 8 or 10 minute jam. Like if they want to get there, they'll get
The biggest, in my 15 minutes of reading the forums and stuff, I think the biggest gripe with last night's show that I saw was that the Sense and Subtle Sounds jam just kind of like fizzled out. Um, which, okay, I mean, fine, but a
there.
really awesome Chalk Dust into No Quarter came next, so it's not like they played a ballad or whatever. It's still a rockin' show. And I
Yeah,
wouldn't have called that a ripcord either, because it just kind of like they all kind of collectively just kind of stop the jam. Sometimes it just
yeah,
happens.
it does. Yeah. So from a musician's perspective, you like what do you think it's just like they didn't find the bass and they're like, all right, let's try something else? Like, is that do you think
I
that's a
don't
thing
know.
that consciously happens?
I don't know. I mean, I think sometimes like just weird things happen. Sometimes the
Yeah.
jams just take off, and sometimes they don't. One thing, in Susie Greenberg, we saw I think Paige's synthesizer for some reason wasn't working. Like there's no
Huh.
sound coming out of it. Like during that like first solo little break
Yeah.
in Susie
Yeah.
Greenberg. So I was wondering if maybe Paige during the synth jam was like playing that, and there was no sound coming out of it. So like the rest of the band might thought Paige had kind of like dropped out, and maybe
Uh-huh.
that's what
Uh-huh.
led to it
Yeah.
fizzling out. But yeah, we'll never know.
Yeah. No way to know. I remember when we did an interview with Trey for After Midnight, and I'm sure that this has been I think he probably said this elsewhere, but I think that night, the last night of the tour in Alpine, when they played that Ruby Waves, that they were like going to do a big jam that night. That
Right,
was like that was going to happen, and they thought I think maybe he thought it was going to be the Mercury, and
right.
then it just like didn't work, but the Ruby Waves did work, and that's just like fascinating to me how you on stage in the moment decide like, all right, well, we're not there, so we'll try something else, and that Ruby Waves
Yeah,
like it worked. I
right.
guess it's just like you said, it just there's no way to know. But does that ever happen to you, like playing like on stage, like where songs just don't work, so you go to something else?
Yeah, a little bit, but I think Fish is so open with the way they do their shows that they don't really have as much of a game plan as most other bands when they come on stage. So, um, for them, I think there's more room for uh, not like train wrecks or anything like that, but there's more room for like kind of things not going as you might have expected. Whereas, I play in bands that improvise and things like that, but generally there's some sort of like roadmap for what we're going to do, and we know how we're going to execute it. So, I don't think we're like open to the kind of news of the night as to the same extent as Fish.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, makes sense. Um, the what do you think about Life Beyond the Dream?
Um, uh, Humble brag, I called that before the
Sweet,
encore.
nice.
Um, I mean, I think that's where it belongs. I would much prefer it in the encore instead of like in the middle of the second set or like towards the end of the second set. I like it. I think it's a good song. I don't necessarily want to hear it every night, but once in a 5 show run, I'll take that.
Yeah, I think Jerry. I'm just posting a comment here from Jerry. Thanks for tuning in, Jerry. He said it's 11-year-old, and he both called it the Tweezer reprise. I was calling it on Friday night incorrectly. I was hoping that it would come Sunday night, but
Yeah.
what was it? Was it surprising or was it expected? Any
I was
reaction from you guys?
I was surprised, but I love Tweezer Reprise. It's the best 3 minutes in rock and roll. As soon as they started playing Tweeprise, my friend turned to me and he said, "Yeah, I'm encore tomorrow." So I do like that call.
All right, well
Yeah,
that sounds fine to me.
yeah.
What are you expecting or hoping for tonight?
Well, there's still some big jam songs left on the table. There's what Z's, Carini, Piper.
Yep,
Piper is like really what I'm hoping for.
nice.
But I think we might get, I think we have the saying, never miss a Sunday show. I think in recent years, the Friday night shows of 3 night runs have actually been like the big jam kind of like psychedelic nights.
Yeah,
More so than Sundays in the last few years. But I think for this run, I think now that the people who just came for the party on Friday and Saturday are going home. I think we'll get a show for the hardcore fans tonight.
I
But
love it. I
again,
love it.
but if you go in with those expectations, like, and
Yeah,
that's all you want, then you may be disappointed. So I
yeah.
think the way they're playing right now, it's going to be a good show, whatever kind of style they decide to go with.
Yeah, they've been the simples of this tour have been great, and I think it's been a little while. I feel like that's
Yeah,
the go-to that they could bust out. But you're right that it's in trying to the 2 night run or the 3 night run, trying to like figure out like all right, which night is going to have which thing. Like it's just
yeah, no, that's a
not gonna
fool's
work out
errand.
for you, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
um, so you're a drummer.
yes.
What do you think about Fishman at this point? Is there anything?
He's just blows my mind. He just I'm not like a big fan of like other jam bands for the most part. And that's
Yeah,
I don't mean like I dislike them, but like I think one of the things that kind of holds me back from like really loving them, and I think sometimes they sound similar, is that the drummers, despite being very talented drummers, typically just play beats behind the jams. And Fishman is like so core to the Fish sound, and he's just like constantly evolving. He's never just like playing a straight beat behind the jams. He's like constantly mixing it up and taking the jams in different directions and just playing really creative stuff. He blows my mind every night. It's just incredible.
I think that seems like the best summary. Tom was saying yesterday, which I noticed this morning when I was listening back to last night's show, just that like in the live Fish mix, he's really prominent. Like during Squirming Coil, when Page started his solo, it sounded like he was like playing like a little drummer boy sort of thing, like throughout Page's solo until the part where they all kind of drop out. And
Yeah,
it's in the mix of the live Fish, it's like very prominent. And I feel like live it's not quite as prominent, but Mike is kind of louder in the mix live. Do you notice those
yeah,
differences or between the different mixes and who sounds higher and
yeah.
lower?
I think it depends on the show. I mean, I think in Hershey, for me, I think Mike he was present in the mix, but not quite as loud as he has been in AC. But I think from where I've stood in the crowd the last 2 nights, uh, all four of them are like perfectly mixed. At a few points, it kind of felt like I was wearing headphones. Like that's how clearly I could hear all of them. So Gary's
It's
doing
pretty
a really good
amazing.
job. Yeah.
That's a huge compliment. Um, cool. Well, this is awesome. It was great to catch up with you, man. I'm glad you got to catch these shows.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for having me on. Always fun to talk fish and catch up. You said you're going tonight?
Yeah. I'm about 20 minutes from there here at AC at this house, so we're gonna head down around 4. It'd be great to say hi in person.
Yeah, yeah. We'll be in touch. Have fun tonight, man. It's gonna be a good one. Are you doing any other shows this summer?
I'm going. No, I'm going to Vegas. That's my
Awesome.
next stop. I went to Nashville, which was also a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Nashville is just, I mean, the Ascend Amphitheater is outrageous.
I'm
Really
going
sweet.
to Dick's for the first time since 2015, so really,
Nice.
really excited for that. Dick's is like kind of the opposite vibe as AC. It's just like so laid back and chill.
Yeah.
And I think AC is what you'd expect from AC,
Yeah.
a little ratchet, but like totally awesome and fun for like 3 days maximum.
Well, I hope that the tour continues on. And Mike was wearing a mask the other night. I think he posted a picture on Instagram of a mask that said something like, "I'm wearing this so that live music can exist." So I agree with that philosophy.
Yeah, yeah. Fingers
Yeah.
crossed things keep going well for the rest of the
Yeah.
tour, and we get to have all of these shows. I think we'll be in good shape. I'm excited about um, the vaccine policy and all of that. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think we're in
Yeah.
store. There's good stuff in store for the rest of the summer.
Yeah, and if people watching are not convinced by public health experts and science, let the Helping Friendly podcast tell you that you should get vaccinated for the good of tour.
Yeah.
Um, Jackson, thanks for joining, man.
Thanks, RJ. Talk soon.
Okay. All right, guys. That was awesome. Jackson's great. Really love talking to him. And we will be back tomorrow. I think that we are going to get some of the HFPod team together tomorrow for our 1 o'clock broadcast to kind of break down the tour, this leg of the tour, as there's going to be a break, of course, between Atlantic City and the West Coast run. So tune in tomorrow at 1. It'll probably be at 1 tomorrow, unlike today. But we appreciate you guys tuning in. If you see us out there on the boardwalk or in the show, say hi. I have Osiris koozies that I want to give you. And I hope to see Jackson out there too. So thanks, everybody. And again, check out shipcannabis.com if you want to win tickets, airfare, and accommodations to the 30th and 31st in Las Vegas, and get vaccinated, because that's how these concerts are going to continue. All right. See you guys later. Lance says, have a great show, fellows. You too. Everyone have fun.